Bienvenidos a Taboo Talk Latina Edition. Yo soy Cynthia.
And I'm Jeanette, and today we're diving into a conversation that so many of us can relate to: the unspoken struggles of being a mother while also pursuing a career.
Because let's be real, en nuestra cultura, being a mom is already a full-time job. But what happens when you're also an entrepreneur, a corporate professional, or a leader? Society expects us to divide our lives to be 100% moms at home and 100% dedicated at work without missing a beat.
And today we're flipping the script. We're having an honest, raw conversation about the pressures, the guilt, and the burnt out that comes with balancing motherhood and ambitions. And we have the perfect guest to break it all down for us.
Our guest today is an absolute powerhouse. Denise Castro is a certified CHRO, business owner, keynote speaker, and author of Womb of a Mother, The Odyssey of Motherhood.
She's also the founder of Virtual Mom Collective, a community dedicated to empowering mothers in the workplace and beyond. With over 15 years of experience in construction and real estate, Denise has helped countless professionals achieve leadership and business success, all while navigating motherhood.
She's here to share her real, unfiltered experience as a mom, entrepreneur, and advocate for workplace change. Denise, welcome to our show. Thank you for being here with us.
So
Thank you so
excited.
much for having me. Yay. What a beautiful introduction. I love it.
Well deserved. That was very powerful.
Yes, and I just want to shout out to you because I was able last week to attend one of your summit and it was beautiful. I got to experience the community that you're building. Just on behalf of us, thank you so much because it's something as mothers, as business owners, it's so needed. So it was beautiful to be in the same space that you created.
Thank you so much. That
Thank
means
you.
so much. Thank you for providing this space and this platform for voices because together, I always say, juntas somos más. So I just want to start with that.
That is
Yes.
so true. Thank you, Denise.
Yes, and we're going to start with our first segment, Balancing Motherhood and Ambition, the Unspoken Struggle. Denise, let's start with the big one, the big question. Why do you think working moms feel so much pressure to separate their lives? Like we have to be fully present at work, but also be fully present at home as moms?
That's a great question. I used to think that it was more about leadership and like personal development. But the truth is, it's the way that the society builds the paradigm for us. So society tells you maybe perhaps if you take more classes or you would take more leadership courses or you go back and you finish that MBA, all while being a mother. And the truth is that there's really no foundation on how we can sort of compartmentalize all those things simultaneously. We kind of aren't given a roadmap on how to do it all. It's just kind of like figure it out. So there's a lot of gray area in the expectations. And I feel like social media also in these past 20 years that it's been around for our generation, because I'm a millennial, has created a bit of a false narrative on how to balance it all. So the way I achieved the balance was falling flat on my face and realizing it's actually the structure that needs to be broken apart. It's the narrative that needs to be broken apart, that we can do it all and really focus on the things that are more important. So I said, I think at the summit that we sometimes are expected to mother without having the concept of having a job to provide for, and we work as if we don't have children to be mothering in the household. And having to select between being a mother and having a job is not something that we should even be questioning. It's not something that should be part of that narrative. So I feel like the societal structures and demands are something that we, as women and as mothers, really need to break apart, and we need to start questioning, because it wasn't really built in our favor. It wasn't built with mothers in mind. It wasn't built with women who jump into that bridge of motherhood in mind, in my opinion.
And
Yeah.
going back to our roots, I also feel that it has to do a lot with the way as Hispanics we are raised, right? Or we believe that the man should be the provider when the mom, the wife should stay home with the kids and continue to provide as a mom and as a wife, which first, it's not fair. It's not how it should be, right? But also we believe that that's the way that we should do it, that if we're not following those steps, we're not being a good wife, we're not being a good mom. But then when we do have to carry a career on our shoulders, then we put that pressure on us with everything you just said. So I feel like it hits home for so many of us, because whether we're going through it now, we've been at it at some point in our lives, we feel that we're constantly battling with being a mom, being a wife, being a good employee, and it's never good enough. And what you said about getting your certificate, like I also thought it was getting your certificate and being better in personal development and leadership, but it's not just that. There's so many little pieces that go into it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was beautiful. And I always think about, and I've said this before about my mom, and I would see her just hustling, like working, like Jeanette said, as Latinas, we think that we have to do it all. And I always look back at my mom. I'm like, my mom had two full-time jobs while taking care of us. Like that is just so mind blowing. So because I saw that in her, I thought, well, that's just the way I have to do it. That's just the way I have to lead too. So that impact of how you were raised is so powerful because it bleeds into then the way you portray yourself and how you should do it yourself.
Exactly. Yeah, deconstructing that generational expectation and trauma is the hard part of accepting the Latino mentality of this worked for them, but it doesn't work for me. And it ends with my children. Not to say that I don't want my kids to obviously explore, the summit explored this last week, what their dreams are, what their hopes of being an adult feels like, but taking space of enjoying of their childhood, right? Because it goes by so quickly. And I feel like in our generation, because our families had to do so much more to provide para proveer para el futuro, it was like that expectation of this equates to success and you should be happy that we did all this for you. And that puts a lot of expectations and pressure on us as children. And we
Yes.
carry that, and that's embedded in the way that we function. I am, for a lack of a better word, I always say a recovering, not perfectionist, but overachiever. I'm a recovering overachiever only because I fear that if I don't achieve enough, like my parents did for us, then I'm not equating to success. And I won't be able to cater to the dreams, and I won't be able to have hope in my inner child. So it's like an inner struggle that constantly we are working with of the way we're raised as children and the way that we're raising and parenting not only our kids, but ourselves in the future.
Denise, you made my eyes get watery. It's because I was just thinking that myself the other day, and it hits home because we feel just like I'm grateful for my mom and for what she was able to provide for us and my family. But what you just said, I feel like I was just talking to me the other day that I want to do so much more for my kids. And I look at them growing up and I feel like I haven't done enough, or I'm not where we think we should be at yet, right? And it makes you feel and question yourself like an overachiever. Like, it's not that I'm ungrateful. I just want to do more because I want to provide more and I want to be better than how they raised me, if that makes sense.
Of course.
So that felt great in a way because it feels, again, of why we have this, that we're not alone, right? And we're all thinking about it. We're all going through it. And it's sad, that we have to. But to be here from someone else it's healing in a way. So thank you for that. And we see this a lot also in women's in C-suite positions or running their own businesses. And they feel like they can't show their mom side because it'll make them seem like less capable. Did you ever feel that way in your career?
Yes, absolutely. So my story really stems back from 2016. I'm a woman in construction, so I am mostly, surrounded by male counterparts, and we have to keep showing up, for ourselves for those positions that normally wouldn't be, populated by females. And when I was interested in doing construction, it was more from like not only the marketing perspective and the real estate, but the fact that there was such a small percentage of something like 7% or 8%, I think, in the state of Florida, women who are women contractors or taking space in C-suite positions at a higher level. And so when I started like looking at that and going to these conferences for real estate and construction, I realized I wanted to make my own mark in my own way. And at the same time, when I became a mom, I wasn't expecting to become a mom. My first daughter, Sophia Grace, was a stillbirth, shy of 19, almost 20 weeks. And in that event in my life where she was essentially taken from me, it was this feeling of what have I done to deserve this opportunity in my life where I thought I would be a mom. I thought I would have, my construction position elevated, and I was very fearful for the future. I was worried that if I didn't come back to work after I lost her, that my job was in jeopardy. And it's the narrative that I fed myself because I again was given into the narrative of imposter syndrome, that we don't belong in these spaces, that we don't belong in construction positions, that, women who want to be in construction don't deserve to be mothers. So I remember going back and not really processing and taking space. And that took a long time to undo. It's a work in progress always. Remember her in everything that I do. Everything that I do is embedded in her and was showing up for women who go through those life events. And women in my community, the same thing for the nonprofit, for Virgin Mom Collective. It's being my community is being the mother that all of us needed when we had these moments in our lives, to say it's okay to navigate loss. It's not weakness. It's actually very courageous. And I think building up the courage to talk about that story, which really took me a long time, makes me a stronger CEO. Well, really, I'm not a CEO, but I am of my own business, but I'm a vice president. And being a minority shareholder, I think, makes me feel empowered because my counterparts were so moved with my story. And so I feel like, we don't necessarily share enough because, again, we don't want others to feel like we can't do the job. And I feel very strongly about mothers because if we can labor and we're literally bringing lives into the world, right? And we're laboring on love and we're birthing, this is my point term, we're birthing the future taxpayers of the United States.
Yeah.
That really demands respect. And that is something that we as women can negotiate in terms of our worth, what we bring to the table. Not only can I do this job, but I'm also providing for the young minds that one day will continue to fuel these jobs. So it's a reconstruction, it's a redirection. It's why I wrote my book. And it took me a while to get rid of that boss babe mentality, boss babe all the way. I'm not a big fan of boss babing all the way to the top because it's not a very genuine, and I feel like it's in a way pits us against other women, and it becomes like a competition in many ways.
Yeah, that was beautiful. Very well said. And we know that mom guilt is real. I'm sure we've all felt that, especially when we're ambition. But, let's try to flip the script. What's one moment in your career or business that made you step back and think, wow, I'm so proud of myself?
I think it was when I had my daughter, my second daughter, and I had this perfectly healthy, it was like a crazy time. She was born during COVID. But I held this perfectly beautiful, healthy baby in my arms. And I was afraid for what the future could hold for her. And I remember feeling a little bit of guilty on bringing her in such a weird, such a turmoil. And I remember just thinking to myself, making her a promise that I would never not say her sister's story. I would never not show how wonderful and hard love is, because no one sees the unpaid labor. No one sees the day in, day out of all the things that go into, being a parent, to get the wheels in motion so that we can continue to be ourselves, our jobs, have this really beautiful, important conversation. They don't see all the things. So making a promise of being really honest and transparent about, if I started a community in the future, that I would hold space for mothers who really want to talk about the realities of what the day in and day out looks like. And I feel like Virtual Mom Collective has kept its promise.
My gosh, so powerful. And
Beautiful.
touching a little bit about what you just said back to this about the boss babe mentality, right? And what you're building is completely different. And it's powerful because there was a time in my life that I would go by the boss babe because you thought that would own power, leadership, and growth, right? But when you really break down the concept of it, it's really us competing against each other. And I love that you said that because I guess that all of us, we believe that we are boss babes and we are, but it's that narrative of what we really are in the end. Like with the boss babe mentality, that doesn't exist anymore. Now it's about collaborating, building what you have with Virtual Mom Collective, which we'll touch a little bit more in depth on that later today. It was really exciting to see that it's not just for women, but for mothers, because we don't get that recognition. We're not being heard, we're not being seen. And it's not just in the workplace, but at home and everything that we do. We are titled as moms, right? And I'm sure you come across a lot of women when you tell them, tell me about yourself. The first thing we say, we're moms. I'm a mom of one. I'm a mom of two. That's like the
Yeah.
first thing we introduce ourselves with, right? Because we own it, but then it goes back to we don't get enough credit for it. So, my gosh, that was beautiful. And today you're going to make me so emotional.
I'm already getting emotional. I'm
I
like,
know
I don't think it's
I haven't really
waterproof. I
cried in
must.
an episode, and today I'm like really feeling my emotions because as a mom and as an entrepreneur and everything that I have going for us and for myself, it hits home to know that we're not alone in our struggles.
Yeah. And I love what you have built because, like you mentioned, you have a COVID baby. I also have a COVID baby. He's 4. And I think about that moment. The world was going crazy, right? It was a very difficult time for all of us. And me and you, we were pregnant, trying to, deliver this baby while the world is shutting down. And right after, when I had my son, my maternity leave was denied. And we'll get into that in a bit. And I remember I had such a hard time with postpartum depression. And when I went to your summit last week, I'm like, man, can you imagine if I would have came across your page that moment when I gave birth to my son and I was struggling with postpartum depression? I needed this community. So I'm so thankful that you went ahead and did it because there's so many women out there that are struggling with what I struggled back then, and they have something to look forward to. So it's just so beautiful what you're doing.
Thank you. I'm not gonna cry, not yet.
I know, I was going to say, I won't make you cry. We'll go into
No, but
our...
it's okay. Crying is good. That's
Yes.
another thing. We're like, we're not gonna cry, but crying is actually very good for us.
Yes, letting our emotions out, right? Because another taboo, right, in the Latina community, don't cry, especially I think
Girls,
this was mentioned in your summit, like, little boys don't cry. Like, boys don't cry. They don't show their emotions. And that's something that we have to break, right? That taboo we have to break. Like, yes, boys do cry. We cry. Everyone cries, right? You have to
right?
yes, yes.
We come
So,
crying into the world. I mean, not always, but yeah, most of the babies when we're born, we're like, what is happening?
Of
Like, what
course.
is going on? I was so comfortable and I'm not happy. It's a normal reflex. It's a normal, pathway to a reaction. And it's uncomfortable sometimes. Obviously, I'm sure you guys can feel this on when your child nonstop screams and cries and they're having, their moment slash with sadness and you're like, oh my God, they're spiraling and it's uncomfortable to hear. But, if they don't do that, then they're genuinely not going through the normal feelings of what their age group. And then they're just not being children. They're children. And we sometimes need to be children too and kick and scream and when things don't go our way and feel all the things because again, that inner child never leaves us. They're always there. So I feel like that's really important to validate because I have a son and he is actually a lot more emotionally sensitive than my daughter. And I love that he feels all those things. I really do.
Yeah, my boys too.
yeah, beautiful. And now moving on to our second segment, breaking the cycle, advocating for mothers in the workplace. Now let's talk solutions. What are some workplace policy that need to change so moms can actually thrive in their careers?
That is a really good $1 million question that we're still
Yes.
quietly trying to answer. No, not quietly. So Equal Pay Day was actually on one hand. It starts with not only policy, but really advocating for yourself. So when you know that you are ready to expand or looking to start a family, it's really important that you do the research before, because maybe you are, working for a corporation that doesn't have any FMLA, that doesn't have any paid leave. And FMLA is different from paid leave. A lot of people, paid sick leave is not the same as, the Family Medical Leave Act. That's what FMLA stands for. That's typically in the state of Florida unpaid. You get 3 months of unpaid time off. And I remember thinking, well, that's just kind of the norm, there's no questions about it at the, workplace that I was working with. And then you go through the motions and you're like, what? I just only had 3 months? Like, how is this even possible? They can't even feed themselves. They can't, let alone be away from their mom. And if you're breastfeeding, we're supposed to figure it all out. And I actually wrote one of the chapters in the book. It's called The Breastfeeding Diaries. I encourage you to read it. It's about how I accidentally invited a client of mine to breastfeed on me because I was so overtired, overworked. For the same reason, I came back to work after, 3 short months, and I was trying my best just to do the work that I just in the blink of an eye before I became a mom could do in a couple hours, but no longer could put two cohesive sentences postpartum because I was completely sleep deprived and going through postpartum depression. And I think if and when you are not about starting your own company, a lot of women and a lot of mothers will start their own, side hustle or business because the model or corporation doesn't suit the needs of the mother. It doesn't provide the leave, the insurance, the health insurance that we so very much rely on. And so we're kind of like stuck between a rock and a hard place when we make decisions, because we're like, well, we don't want to leave this job, even though it's unpaid FMLA, but I really need the health insurance. So I'm going to have to come back to my workplace either way. So it's like a vicious triangle that we're made to decide on, and the three corners don't really support us. So we go through the motions of like, okay, I'm not going to question it because it is what it is. And if and when you really want to advocate for better solutions, it goes to two things, FMLA and childcare. When we have the babies, and then when they're on our side, and honestly, the support and the financial need of that support of not just, having a nanny or a grandma or like a tia come and take care of your children, because you're the mother. You want to be actively raising them at the same time as being able maybe to go back part-time. So, it's really important. I always bring this to attention. Follow the acts that support, FMLA. Advocate with your local constituents. Pick up the phone. You can talk to Virtual Mom Collective. They'll tell you who to call, because I call them very often. Of the local people here, not only in Miami-Dade, but the state of Florida, and how we can better have, policies and leaves that support mothers and parents, because it's so mind-boggling to me that only mothers would be expected to have time off and not fathers. Like, fathers are part of the narrative. Why are we saying that they just have to, continue their jobs? Not like they also brought a newborn and a baby into the world. So the fact is like, oh, well, I'm just going to bring up these policies that support, maybe mothers, but parental equity really lies in those two things, in childcare and FMLA. And without those two things, we cannot support families. And without the support of families, we cannot do our jobs. So they go hand in hand. So if you want, people to advocate to better policies, that's great. We will do that. But at the same time, it starts with maybe the corporations. Like, for my own, I offer paid leave to both women and men. Obviously, construction, like, you will have to have a backup, but you will I'll pay 60% of your salary while you take, 3 months off. I think that's fair. I think that gives you an opportunity to be financially not where you need to be, but, it'll take the burden off so that you can be at ease about not losing your and raising your family. Well, when you're ready, you can come back. Beautiful.
And that goes back to Cynthia. I know you have a powerful story to share too, because with what you're talking about, she went through it with the postpartum, not just what she was going through, but after like getting back to work. So I would love for her to share it.
Yeah, I had such a hard time, like I mentioned, the pandemic, world shut down. I was pregnant, had my COVID baby. And in the midst of it, from the very beginning, it was a new job. So I knew I didn't qualify for maternity because I wasn't there for a whole year. I personally knew the CEO of the company, and so did my husband. And it was over the phone when I told him, I'm going to leave and go back to my old job because I know here I don't qualify for maternity leave because I haven't been employed for a year. And he was like, no, don't worry about it. Like, I got you. Like, we'll work something out. And it was over the phone. I didn't document anything. And leading up to my 9 months, when I was 7, 8 months, I would check in with him. I would CC HR like, hey, I really need to discuss this and have a plan before I give birth. Never replied back to any of my emails. And then finally, I am about to give birth and they send me an email saying, your maternity leave is denied because you have not been employed with us for a whole year. I got that email as I was driving to the birthing center to give birth to my son. And of course, I, wasn't fully there, wasn't fully capable of answering the email. I give birth, come home, finally settle down, read the email, try to call him, ignores my call, doesn't reply to me, contact HR, and, they simply say, we don't have anything in writing that he agreed, to give you maternity leave. So unfortunately, it is denied. And because I was a new employee, I gave birth to my son in January, which means your PTO restarts. So I only had 5 PTO days. So I gave birth, had 5 days off, and within 5 days, I was back at it working. And I'm a tax accountant, and January is extremely busy for us. So it wasn't like we weren't in busy season. And even saying this, it gets me so angry. Until this day, of course, I left the company. I work for a different company. Until this day, I never heard from him. He never apologized, nothing. I never heard back from him. And it just gets me so upset because, why do we have to go through this, right?
Not even a question, right? Why
right. Yeah. Like, why do we even have to go through this? Why do I have to be driving to give birth and have to read that email and be dealing with that? So to me, this is a subject that I'm so passionate about. And I'm like, there has to be a change. Like, something has to happen for this to change. Like, this policy of only getting 3 months of maternity, like, that to me is just outrageous. Like, you look at a 3-month-old baby, to leave that baby home, like you said, many of us are breastfeeding. How do you navigate that, right? When you have to be in the workforce and then at the same time you have to breastfeed. So yeah, that's my story. And I'm so passionate about this topic. And, I always toss around different ideas because I feel like it has to change and it has to start with us.
1,000%.
So,
And I encourage you in one way, shape, or form, if you ever want to write your story or put it out there in essence for a piece, maybe our blog. We have a great blog readership, and literally it encompasses all the different aspects of motherhood since our inception. And really, motherhood changed a lot for us during the pandemic because we showed the world how much we have going on in the background, in the Zoom meetings, in the things, in our jobs, to try and just function as normal human beings and continue to take up space so that our minds don't collapse, and we don't feel like, you know what, this is just too much. I rather just retreat from the world and not just continue all this, because that is the most critical moment in our lives, right, Cynthia, where this person probably added a huge component of how your postpartum depression was going to be triggered because he set the paradigm of the unsupportive, you're not worth it, Like, I didn't give it to you because of X reasons, or you just didn't really give an answer. And that moment is when you really need the most support, because your self-worth is questioned within yourself, because you are going through the most vulnerable moment of your life. You're bleeding, from your parts. I won't say that. And you're just trying to slap on makeup and pretend like it's all okay. And that is horrifying that we're forced to do that every day when decide that we want to be mothers. And it shouldn't even be a choice. And we're forced into these vicious triangles, as I say, to make decisions that we never thought were even going to be decisions in the fact of becoming mothers.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's going back to we're just a numbers game to them, right? And how does that make us feel? Because when we have to get a call to cover for someone or get something through for a deadline or anything, as women, that's like our power, superpower. We make things happen, but then they take advantage of that, especially when we're mothers and we're wives and all the other titles that we have aside from our profession. Like, it's heartbreaking. So we're here to be a voice and change that, because it starts with us. And this takes me to, which I know why you founded Virtual Mom Collective. And I would love for you to speak more in depth about it, of that moment that made you realize I needed to start this more in depth.
Yes. So Virtual Collective happened in this room, as my office, and I couldn't go to any of the job sites as I was pregnant, or advised to stay away. And I remember thinking to myself, God, I feel like a caged canary, right? I feel like I'm here just waiting for her to be born. And everyone was just had this moment of like realization that time was going by so slow, and it was like frozen, because we just didn't know what to do with the information that was coming our way. And a lot of disinformation, right? Because it was like, oh, do this and do that. And stay home, put on the mask. And it was like, just cover up and cover up. And we were covering up our faces, and we were just retreating from the world. And I remember thinking, God, I need someone else to talk to. I need someone else who's feeling this way of like, I'm not excited right now about carrying my daughter. I feel really afraid and scared and worried, and I don't have the answers. But what I do need is a place where I can express all these things and not be judged, and know that, I have to tap into some sort of mindfulness exercise, because I really did feel like if I didn't, then my mental health was going to take a dive, right? And I know the signs and triggers for postpartum and PTSD. After the delivery of my daughter, I suffered with PTSD, because it opened up the door for my first experience with my first daughter. And so simultaneously, I remember thinking maternal mental health is it's not a joke. It's really something that in this country, it's an afterthought, in my honest opinion. And we really got to dig up for the resources. You really got to find your village and find your people, because not everyone's going to feel that way. It's always that judgmental of like, oh yeah, you should feel thankful that you're having a healthy pregnancy.
Yeah.
Be thankful that you have another girl to take up space in your life, and be thankful that you have a roof over your head. And it's that feeling of like, God, I know I have so much, but I still feel like really worried, and I feel like what I have around me is not enough. So it started as an idea. I started doodling on my notebooks. This is my little BMC notebook, my little mindfulness journal, and I started doodling the logo. And I remember thinking the word mom, right? Like, I always kept saying this. And I was doing the mom, and, trying to be like very conscientious of what's mean to each other. And this M is actually this is a lifesaver, and the M is extending a lifesaver to another. And so together we're each other's lifesavers. Actually, where is the role mom? The virtual webinar. I became the Virtual Mom Collective, and started like a humble Facebook group, and I was like, guys, I think that we should do mindfulness exercises. I would love to lead the first workshop and talk about what it means to be a mother in quarantine. And then a lot of local businesses started sending us like journals, candles, their products, maybe like a delivery meal. I remember we had a company who was like delivering meals from their homes because, let's face it, I couldn't really go to the supermarket without, risk of whatever. And I was just worried because I was just really tired of getting tested and I was tired of wearing masks. It's uncomfortable and I'm hot and I'm crabby and tired and I can't talk to anybody. So like this is pretty much all I had at the moment. And so many women just started, the first time it was like we had 5 people invited and then I ended up with 83 people in the blue jeans meeting. And I was like, where did they all come from? And
Or these
thinking,
people.
like to myself, like, where did they all come from? They were just like, they just joined the call and they started resharing the invitation. And it was a really special moment because that means that the lifesaver was extending to others. It means that other people were feeling exactly the same way of like, shit, I do not feel like an adequate mother in this moment. I feel like a vanishing ghost that no one really talks to because all we can do is stay at home and be quarantined and not question, what is going to happen with the remainder of our lives. And I feel very like called to action in that moment because a lot of the joy got robbed from us. A lot of the like moments that we had maybe with our other children where they had like, a baby shower and they got, to meet their grandparents on the day that they were born. All those moments were taken from me, from my daughter. And I remember thinking, I feel like I need to take the opportunity to say that this is we're not okay. And perhaps we'll never be okay in the sense that we are going to continue to do what we need to do to advocate for each other. But the story will always remain that we mothered in one of the hardest moments of our lives. And together we got through it and we're alive. And that validation is all we need to continue to take up space. And let them not forget that we mothered with a movement, with intention, with our roots, with breaking down generational systemic traumas within our own families. We mothered all those things and parented ourselves at the same time.
Mm. That was so beautiful.
So beautiful. My boy was also born in through COVID, and wow, I felt those words because yeah, we didn't have a baby shower, couldn't meet his a family, and I felt bad for him because as he continued to grow, and he felt scared to come out to the world. So every time that we'll throw like the first birthday party, I remember him crying. Like if it's something wrong, and it's because he saw so many people around him because we were finally getting out there again after COVID and it was still not 100%, but it hits home because you're like, wow, he did miss those milestones. I missed those milestones, and because of what you built, that beautiful community, once again, that you couldn't find and you built it yourself, it's what's even more powerful. Because that's in our moment of weakness where we question our worth, when we feel we're not good enough. Or again, you just sharing that, I wish I would have met you then. And it
Yes.
makes us seem that we're going through it alone, or, oh my God, it's just my luck, right? Or like I always go by, life is not happening to you, it's happening for you, but you don't realize it in the moment. And when you decided that something was not right, I applaud you for building it. So thank you for creating what you have and for sharing that powerful story. Because today, maybe we can't help those that went through it at that time, right? Like us through COVID, we didn't have each other. But now it's setting that foundation with what you're doing, that whoever hears this episode or anything that you have to share, they know now who to go to, that they're not alone.
Yeah, beautiful. And if you can change one thing about the way Latina moms are treated in the workforce, what would it be?
Well, there's so many answers to that question. But I think it's really important. Do you ever get this that los niños no hablan suficiente español? Your kids don't speak enough Spanish. They only want to speak English. Like, how do you expect them to know their Latino roots if they don't continue to like speak Spanish? And for us, it was like, well, we didn't really have a choice because my grandparents didn't speak English. They've been here in this country for 50, 60 years. And
Same.
my son said the
Yeah.
other day in the kitchen, Tata does speak English. The other day she said, hey, how are you? I'm like, that's the only sentence she knows.
And they sound like gringos, right?
Yeah. And he's like, yeah, but I respond with ¿Cómo estás? I'm like, because it's the only sentence that you know in Spanish.
That's
He's
so
like,
funny.
but it feels silly when I say it. And I said, why do you feel silly? Because they make me feel like they repeat, or they tell me how to enunciate, como estás, como está. And I'm like, well, also Cubans like to eat words or, certain letters of when we speak. And I think it's really important because we're cross-generational Latinas, right? So like we're embedding the English and the Spanish, the dreamer feeling of like, you need to know English and you need to know that language to get ahead. Forget about your roots, because Spanish is where it all started and you come from a Spanish speaking country. So don't you forget it. And it's like a power struggle of that bilingual, like which one's more empowering, and you have to choose. And I'm telling you right now, Latina moms, you do not need to choose, because if your child feels more comfortable in English, it's not because they don't really relish or understand Spanish. It's because right now in those moments, they're feeling not comfortable or empowered to speak it. And that's okay, because they're being taught in English. And that's okay, because they will understand where they come from inherently. If you also speak in Spanish and English bilingual at home, as I do, and maybe not as much Spanish as you would like, it's okay. Give yourself some grace. You're literally combining two generations of understanding and at the same time raising a new one to feel comfortable in a language that he is being taught in now is in English. It will come. And if it doesn't, that's okay too. That's okay too. We will be a second generational Cuban American, Colombian American, whatever. It doesn't matter.
Hmm.
Is that they're at peace and they're not going to forget where they come from, because if mom is at peace with the way that she's raising her kids in two languages or one, then they will also mirror that same comfort, and they will always ask the questions of where they come from. They will always, my son loves the fact that he gets to be the lead in Hispanic Heritage Month. He loves to sing or be the lead singer. His project was Jose Hernandez. And I say that because Jose Hernandez was the astronaut who speaks at the beginning of the summit. And he says, who better to, creature of the stars than a migrant farm worker? And he's saying that as the first Mexican American to go into space. And my son chose that project for a reason, because he was very interested in the fact that his astronaut, it took 12 applications and 12 years of rejections for them to tell him no, he did not belong in the aerospace NASA program, and he never gave up. And I bring that to your attention because it's so important that we can never continue to, stop advocating for those voices, whether it's in Espanol or in English. The rest will be done. We just need to continue to be conscious and give ourselves grace. Give ourselves grace.
That's great that you said that.
I felt like you're talking to me today in a way.
Yeah, same.
I
I'm
was
like,
just
preach.
that conversation with my son, because I took my youngest to school while the oldest went with the dad to his appointment at the doctor. And as we were getting to school, my youngest goes, Mom, there's a couple of kids at school that they only speak Spanish, but I just talk back in English. And my first reaction was like, baby, but we're also speak Spanish, just like the message that you just shared, right? I didn't think of it that perspective. I was like, because of our roots, I mean, but we speak Spanish. You speak Spanish with grandma, and he knows great Spanish, but he rather speaks English. And wow, I just had that conversation with him, and he was like, oh, okay. But not like in a hurtful way. It was just like trying to explain to him that we also speak Spanish. Why are you saying they speak Spanish and you speak English? So first, I love that perspective. And that is, again, going back to our roots, we have to change it up. And we can't always attack, right? Because that's our mode of always attacking. But then even when I, get mad and I say something in Spanish, he'll make me laugh because you're looking at me like, Mom, you speak Spanish?
Yeah.
So I was like, hi, coño. So it's just funny, to see that reaction from them, because I didn't grow up like that. I grew up con el cinto, la chancleta, and I admit it. I turned out to be fine, but that's how I was raised, unfortunately, and I know many of us too. It wasn't like the lecture, like, let's talk it out, the perspective, like what we're trying to do today for the new generation. So, wow, I feel like you're talking to us today.
Yes.
I'm so glad.
And I love that you said that, because so my little one, when he was 2 and it was time for him to go to like pre-K, we put him in like a private school. So at home, we only speak to him in Spanish because I truly wanted him to learn Spanish and be fluent. So when it was time for him to go to school, my first question when they gave us the tour was, are there any Spanish classes that he'll be taking? I was so, so concerned because I truly wanted him to continue on that journey of learning Spanish. He didn't know anything of English. And she was like, yeah, but the Spanish class is only when he goes to, believe kindergarten or first grade. And I was so worried. I was like, oh my God, he's going to lose like the language. And I remember the principal telling me, like, don't worry, if you speak to him in Spanish at home, like he won't forget.
Yeah.
So as he started going to school, he started picking up English words, of course, which is going to happen. And I would get so like worried, like, oh my God, he's speaking English and he's forgetting Spanish. And then when my mother-in-law would come over and hear him talk in English, she would be like, oh my God, look, he's forgetting to speak Spanish. Look at that. Now
Yes.
you have him in school and he's not talking Spanish.
Mhm.
So again, I would feel guilty because I'm like, oh my gosh, should I have not done that? Should I have not put him in this school? So it's this little mind game, right? That as moms we go through. And I'm like, oh my God, now he's 4 and he is like his vocabulary in English has increased significantly because of course he's in an English school. And then we still talk to him in Spanish here. So now he's able to know how to switch back and forth. When grandma comes, he knows I speak to her in Spanish because she doesn't know English. And then at school, he's 100%, speaking English. But that transition, I remember feeling so guilty. I'm like, oh my God, he's talking English. And then, mother-in-law comes in and it's like, oh my God, no, speak Spanish. So she doesn't say anything.
And you're like, it's okay. And I think about it too. It was like, it's okay. Like my grandma still does, oye, el niño se le olvidó todo el español. La
Yes,
niña
and we
no
break.
habla clarito. I'm like, yes. Deep
Yes.
breath before I answer.
Yes.
Before I answer.
Yes. Oh my God, yes. And now,
How much we have in common, right? With those taboos that we need to really break.
Yes.
yes. And now going into our last segment of the day, let's get personal. Motherhood, healing, and the power of storytelling. You wrote a book, Womb of a Mother, The Odyssey of Motherhood, which dives deep into the Latina motherhood experience. What's one thing you hope every mom takes away from reading your book?
I hope that it's going to be a year actually on the 27th that I published it. So of this month. So I'm
Wow.
really excited
Congratulations.
because one thing I hope that my readers take from it is they feel like they can see themselves in my writing and feel seen and validated, which is essentially why I wrote it. It's not a long chapter book. It is not a novel. It is 10 chapters of the different chapters of motherhood since the beginning of when I became a mom to where I am now, which is a middle mom. I'm in the middle mom moments. So when I decided I was going to write this book, I actually was writing a piece every year. And my second piece actually was published by Scary Mommy. And that was when my son was, God, I think he was almost 6 months. And I remember I was writing, journaling really at night because it was my outlet. It was my way of just putting my thoughts on paper. And those thoughts on paper are really important for us moms because that's really the roadmap to our story. That one day when you get back to, I just feel like we always get back to ourselves, but you get to a place where you feel like less is on your shoulders, that you can perhaps pour into other projects. And I felt like in that moment, I was able to pour back into this project, which really was the assemblage of the 10 chapters that I had written over a period of 8 years to keep mom. And I remember thinking, this is a great way of validating that feeling for myself of not a mom. Because when I lost Sophia, I was not a mom. And I would go to these spaces and I would go to these events and feel like I didn't fit in a lot of the ways that society had created space for entrepreneurs, for boss babes, for CEOs. I didn't see myself in I didn't belong in the mom group, the mommy and me group, and I didn't belong in the happy hour, whatever, real estate groups after work hours. I just didn't see myself in those conversations or those groups anymore. And so my book is literally a validation of that's okay. That's okay because you wrote these words for others, not just for yourself. And you wrote it for your children to know that you poured everything and anything to get back to yourself, to give yourself the honor of knowing that you are a good mother and every day you are enough. So that is what my book is about. And it's the Odyssey because the Odyssey never stops. The motherhood never stops. It's the beginning and there's no end. And I feel that same way about my book. There's no beginning and there's no end. That's why we continue to write a story with our words.
Gosh, I have goosebumps. Please share the link with us on how we can support and purchase your book. I would love to
Yes.
have one.
Yes, absolutely. You can find it on Amazon. Womb of a Mother this month, actually, 50% of the proceeds I give back to Virtual Mom Collective for our mother mentor grants. I'm all about supporting other mothers in their journeys. And my book is actually going to be a short film. There's going to be a chapter, and I'll mention that really
Awesome.
quickly. That chapter is called The Postpartum Carousel. And that's going to be produced by our production chair, Cynthia Marcinko, who is the CEO of the Magus Films. She also is the one who recorded our commercial. She does all our pretty much
Beautiful.
all our film and makes us feel like
Amazing.
the in and out. And the postpartum carousel, very quickly, it's honor for we're going to be navigating postpartum awareness month, which is in the month of May. And so we are looking for anybody who wants to help sponsor and co-produce the film. Any and everybody who donates to Virtual Mom Collective for this short film, where I will be giving the script to Senya to produce, will be listed as a producer of the film. And we are also submitting this piece to the Miami Film Festival, and we're very hopeful, especially since it's such a important topic to our mayor, that we would be able to have an entry. So if you are interested in being part of it, not only just through donations, just know that you look here and you become an actual collaborator and co-producer. There's nothing more that I want than the short film to be produced of this chapter with mothers who have felt the same as me or other people in the same spaces of our lives.
Wow, that's beautiful. We did hear about it while we were at the event, and we're so
Yes.
excited. Like, that's amazing. We cannot wait. And if we can support in any which way, Cynthia and I can discuss it, we will. And of course, also the book. I know at the event they mentioned that they had it and I lost the opportunity to go and get it. So definitely going to order it right after our call because I already have 2 boys and I'm still going through the motherhood that never ends, like you said. And it's a reminder, especially on your moments that you feel down, knowing that you have the community, but also a book that I can just open and it's like a reflection of me, right? Not alone. So that is
Yes.
beautiful, Denise.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Of course. And it takes me now to my conversation and my topic of postpartum depression, because I believe that it's not spoken enough in our culture, right? Especially in Hispanic. So what was your experience with postpartum depression and what advice will you give moms who might be struggling with that right now? Because from my understanding, and that they also shared it at your event, postpartum is not just right after the baby. It can happen at any stage, like it happened to me a couple of years after, because I had my 2 boys back to back. So I didn't get to really have, which I didn't want to, of course, that's not something we want, but I didn't get to experience. But I thought I'm not going through it because that's early on and I'm already ahead. So I would love for you to elaborate a little bit more on that.
Yes. So I also didn't, like similar to you, I didn't allow myself to sort of navigate the postpartum of the first time of my loss. I kind of treated it as a very no, it's, 3 in 5 women have miscarriages, even though it wasn't miscarriage. So I was kind of trying to place myself in a statistic that made me feel like the invalidation in that moment that would create the disassociation of that feeling of depression. So by doing so, it's just like blocking out the emotion, right? Like I'm not going to feel this way because it's as if pretending it happens to all the women. I don't need to talk about it. I don't need to bring it, and nobody needs to know my business. Nobody in my family needs to know about this. It's as if like it never happened. And so obviously it's like works very similar to what you place in Pandora's box. So you're going to just shove that feeling of like unworthiness, that feeling of like I'm not good enough. that feeling of what's wrong with me, that feeling of like, I don't want to talk about this with anybody. And you keep putting those feelings in the box. And so when my son was born, it was like he was a rainbow baby, right? So it was like the promised child. There was so much hope and so much trauma at the same time of like, live, survive, be with me, stay. And that also culminated to the feelings that you put in Pandora's box, because you place the expectation of survive, be with me, I will always protect you, I will never abandon you, I will never have these feelings of what I did with my first upon you as long as you're with me. And so then you fast forward into my daughter's postpartum period, where I feel like COVID also, in that feeling of confinement and that feeling of, uncertainty, also opened the box. Like the feelings of all the other postpartum depressions that I did not navigate in a healthy time manner all exploded and intertwined with one another. And I knew in that moment, when I actually had kidney stones right after my daughter. Like literally 5 days later, I had to go back to the hospital. So I was separated from him. And my husband had to take care of the newborn, and he was, doing mother, father. And at the same time in the hospital, I was feeling like, oh my God, like I feel so inadequate. And I knew in that moment of that feeling of like, I'm not good enough and I don't deserve to go home. I don't want to hold her. I don't want to see her. I knew that I needed to talk to somebody in that moment. And when I had that feeling of like, I don't deserve this, I don't deserve to be a mom, I'd rather stay here and pretend like if this is not happening to me, this is what it should be. Right? I needed to explore what was happening inside me, because I wasn't processing the normal feelings of, and this, when I say normal, these are all normal feelings, but I wasn't processing the normal, I guess, occurrence of events in a healthy manner, because I was completely overwhelmed and I was literally being flooded with so many different feelings of various just unworthiness, really unworthiness and exhaustion at the same time of like, I'm not good enough and I don't deserve to be a mom. And so when I had those feelings, I knew right away, and I spoke to my doctor, and she was like, you can either do this, you can, if there is no shame in medication, there is no shame in talking to someone else about this. You can, however you feel like, in through different, more hostile feelings of before. And I feel like you are just, you're cross integrating all the different various feelings that you did not process in a timely manner. So you get to decide how you want to go about this. And I remember I was like, well, I'm going to talk to somebody, and somebody that I trust. And she actually moved away from a therapist. I loved her. She honestly was just someone I needed to talk about the feelings that I had stored in Pandora's box, and provide really a roadmap to how can I get, I'm all the way over here. How do I get back over here so that then I can perhaps one day be on this side? And I remember having that honest conversation, and I used to tell her, what if I don't get to that side? What if I decide I don't want to be a mom, and I just want to like pretend like this never happened? And she says, you honestly will never know if you never tried. And if you don't have the conversation with yourself and know that having these feelings, it's okay to not be okay, and that's okay. And I remember saying to her, Dad, I just want to be okay. And she's like, well, what do you want to be okay for? I was like, I want to be okay for myself. I just want to be okay with what I look like. I look like I feel, and I want to look like I feel, but I don't want to feel like I look. And she was like, that makes a lot of sense, because you're mirroring exactly all the emotions that you didn't process when you wanted to and you were supposed to. You suppressed it. And I can tell you from years of battling the PPD, is like the mask of imposter syndrome with a different face. Postpartum depression brings denial and unworthiness, and it brings, that ugly sense of like unbelonging. And it just has so many different masks of what it means. And it goes back to, again, catering to your own experience as a child, and having that hard conversation, even with your own mom, of how you're tackling something that she doesn't understand. and maybe she never will, and that's okay. Having that conversation, I think, was really important for me because, I think that a lot of women in my family had postpartum depression or postpartum psychosis. In the sense, my great grandmother, she died giving birth to my grandmother. It was something that, believe it or not, it transfers through generations. Those feelings of unworthiness, the transfer, and so that pressure of be, survive, thrive, it's a lot for us. And I feel like I hadn't addressed not only that, but I hadn't addressed it as like the inner feelings of my inner child. So when I started doing shadow work, it all made sense. It all started to click. One day I was able to shower, and I remember thinking to myself, the shower, I was able to shower and wash my own hair, and I feel like so good right now because I feel like right now I'm gonna go and feed her and breastfeed her, and we're gonna have a great time connecting. And I was really thankful to my daughter because she gave me the invitation of like, she's just a baby. So, that invitation of like the innocence inviting you just to be, and that just silent understanding of connection in that bond of like, you're my mom, I am, I'm an extension of you and you're an extension of me, and together we'll get through this together. And the rest is history.
That's beautiful. And I'm so glad you knew when to get help, right? Because a lot of us are afraid to speak up. We're afraid to say, I need therapy. I need to go on medication, right? That's another taboo in our culture, right? If you go to therapy, oh, tú estás loca. I heard that growing up from my mother. And mental health was not spoken about at all in my household. So for you to recognize when you needed help and you spoke up, that's a big plus right there. So I'm so glad you did.
It is. And also going back to what you created, because I can relate with you with Rooted in Her. It's crazy when you have something inside of you, like you said, you move on, like with your miscarriage. And I'm so sorry to hear that. Like the fact that you can be open about it, it's so powerful. Because I had, before my two boys in my previous relationship, a stillbirth. And I gave birth to him at 25 weeks. I had to deliver. And I remember, and Cynthia, I'm actually sharing just a little bit about this because I know how hard it was for me to open up about it. So you're giving me opportunity to do that. And I gave birth to him on Mother's Day. I'm never going to forget. While all the other rooms, you'll hear, moms celebrating their birth, I was actually saying goodbye to mine. And I was like drugged up. I was like, keep giving me medication. I don't want to be present. I just want this to be done. But then it's powerful because I remember leaving there, like you said, everybody would be like, oh, you're still young. You can have another one. I went back to work. I was then working in corporate America and banking. They did like this, trying to make me feel better, get well soon, guards. That was all within 2 minutes, and then got back to work. And I was still with inside of me, like I just went through a loss, and everybody's like, I'm sorry for your loss. You'll be fine. Move on, move forward. Once I created Rooted in Her, I remember one of the speakers shared about her daughter just passing away. And I don't know, to me that, and all her miscarriages and her stillbirths, and I just broke down because that was inside of me, something that was never healed. I was just putting a smile on. I was creating this movement. I was like, okay, we're doing something powerful. Like that's my story to share, but I was not healed. And I still recall that moment, and I still have his name imprinted in my heart. It's going to be Jaden, right? And it's beautiful because now people are like, oh, you have 2 boys, so be grateful. But it's going back to not being present in the moment and embracing that you go through trauma, you went through it, but you have to learn to ask for help. And I didn't then because of where I come from. They were like, no, you'll be fine. You don't need to do any tests. You don't need to speak to anyone. Just shake it off. That happens to a certain percent of women. And everything that you just shared today throws you back to like, we're humans. And it's crazy how we just pass that as women because we got to get to the next level and the next chapter. And like, just like a book, you keep flipping the script, but you don't get to ever heal from that. So thank you for even allowing me and Cynthia to share this today also, because this platform is for that, and this is why we continue to do stuff that we're doing for our community with what you're doing with Virtual Mom Collective, what we're doing with Taboo Talks, because we need to be louder about it,
Yeah.
and not be scared to speak up. Because to me, I feel so relieved now that I shared it out loud, because I keep thinking that I'm healed from it, but I'm not, because I talk about it for a minute and I put it in the back burner.
Right.
Yeah.
No, and I think it's like you said, it's that even for Latinas, like we just take that like imposter syndrome of like, just be thankful for what you have, that you're young, that you can do this and you can move on. And I was just was the point. I was like, I don't want to move on. I don't want to move on. And when I say that I have one upstairs and two on Earth side, that's okay.
Yeah.
Don't look at me like I'm an alien
Yeah.
because I'm taking space for her in a world where she has made a movement and a foundation of everything that I'm saying and creating. And I'm sure you feel the same way and rooted in her because Jaden will always be a part of you. He is, why you come up and speak to your other kids and just keep taking space in the world. They matter. Those stories really matter. And I remember recently in FIU, I spoke on childcare on day delegation to the Miami day delegation, and they were probably like wondering at the beginning why I opened up with what it means when we have pregnancy, infant loss, miscarriage month, and it's because that goes hand in hand with childcare. Because who is taking care of us when those things happen to us? Who is taking care of all the other things? If we still have other kids that are coming or they're already here on Earthside, who's taking care of us? Nobody, if not ourselves. Because without remembering, without writing the stories, without writing the most uncomfortable things and the saddest things and sharing those that are essential fabrics of like what's interwoven in the way that we mother, then we'll never mother the way that we were expected as children, as parents, as women, as Latinas. We'll never be able to mother in the most intentional and authentic manner.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. And lastly, we always hear it takes a village. But how can moms build that village when they feel like they have no support?
So I want to say a little something contrary to just because I'm going to go against the grain kind of Aquarian.
Of course.
Not every village is for you. Not every village that feels like that warm, fuzzy feeling when you see them online and you see the sparkly events. I've just been a lone wolf for a long time. And the reason I was a lone wolf was a response of like, I don't want people asking me questions. I don't want more blood judgment on the type of mother I am. I don't want people to ask or know what I'm doing. I don't want anyone to know my story. I don't want to get close to others. And in that, it just really was a trauma-based response, right? That meant not joining communities or the mommy and me play groups or, the cute little events that you would take a home, like a mom bag or whatever, with the whatever it was inside. And I went to one. I got kind of like, I want to say suckered in, but like, I was like, well, this is fun. It's like, at this cool place and it's in a garden and like, you don't bring your child, which I was like, okay, well, fine. I'll leave him at home and kind of see what this is about, and like see what other women, other mothers are doing just because I just kind of want to know what's out there. And I feel like I had this sense of belonging where I just didn't know where I belonged. And I remember with my son of having that stance of just like, I'm going to raise you by myself. It wasn't only affecting me, but it was affecting him because he wasn't, socializing with other kids. All the other kids in my family were much older already. I think he had maybe like a cousin who was his age, but it was difficult because it just didn't make sense in the social circles that we were around. And I didn't feel like connected to any of these women that I was just having conversations with. So it's like the village didn't have the people. And I had arrived in a village where it was like all the doors were closed and it said closed, like the sign said closed or come back again or come during these hours where I'm like, how am I supposed to, come in during these hours?
That's
These
my
are the hours
emotions.
where I'm,
Yeah.
like bathing him and like how am I supposed to visit this village when it's like it has all this like kind of like red tape? And I remember thinking to myself, like, why does it make it so impossible? Why is it so hard to find like a village? And you'll see other groups don't have sometimes your best intentions. They don't have your they don't really care about, what you bring to the table.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just about what business you have, how much money you're willing to pay, to join a group where it's like very like, whatever, empty branding really and marketing statements on a piece of paper that make you feel like you belong. And sometimes you have to recognize that in the villages that you tour. And I feel like when we become mothers, we go through various villages. And at the beginning, that's when all the fake villages appear in our lives because they are readily available, very good, branding, and like I said, false sense of marketing. And they just, at the end of the day, know that you're tired and that you're looking for connection, and maybe they don't provide that connection. So do your homework.
Yes.
Just the same way that you do homework with your kids, do your homework on the village and the people that surround you. Make sure that the conversations that you have with people are honest. And if you have any feelings that go against your gut, you know that, do I trust this person? I always guide myself with this question. Do I trust this person to hold my baby? No, this person does not belong in my village.
Oof.
Do I trust this person to have a conversation about my baby? If it's a no, this person doesn't belong in my village. The thing about the village is not going to find one. The village starts with you. And I'm actually quoting my book. And you are your own village. You are your own temple. And if you find your feet of where you belong, the village will come to you.
Gosh, Denise.
So good.
Well, this conversation was so needed today and so powerful, like for all of us, for myself. I think this is the first really episode that I've cried, and Cynthia.
Same, yeah. I mean, we can talk for hours. Like I can
that
stay.
effect on people.
Yeah.
Gosh, that I've been like in tears, or like I can relate so much, and that
Yes.
understand the motherhood aspect of it, right? Because we all can thrive in every area of our lives, but that really understands and that's creating the same space that we've been creating, right? The communities that we're building, that is so important for women like ourselves and that are out there still searching for their tribe, that they're still trying to figure it out, to know that they're not alone. And like I said at your event, and you said here too, we can always build it ourselves, right? When you can't find that one community or just a Facebook group or something that you want to be a part of that you're looking for, then ask yourself, well, maybe I can create it and be that foundation. And that is so powerful, Denise. And we want to thank you. But before we leave, tenemos una última pregunta que we have to be real because todas tenemos a la tía chismosa en nuestras vidas, ¿verdad?
Yes, la que siempre tiene algo que decir de lo que estamos haciendo o de lo que no estamos haciendo.
So, Denise, cuéntanos, ¿qué te ha dicho tu tía chismosa sobre cómo manejas la maternidad y el trabajo?
La tía chismosa de mi vida me ha preguntado si me voy a embarazar otra vez ahora que si estoy flaca.
Why is that always a question?
Porque tengo que tener cuidado que mi esposo no me embarace otra vez ahora que estoy flaca porque estoy muy bonita.
Ay, ay, ay.
Wow, that's a good one.
Y además que no, it's none of your business. Primero que todo, I have to laugh because it's with, the best of intentions and with the most cruel execution,
Yes.
right? Because you're, wow, thank you so much that you are praising my figure, and that obviously doesn't equate to self-worth, even though we always have that societal expectation of like bounce back, have the baby, push it out, get skinny again. That's something that I actively work really hard on, like not being part of that whole trend because I got caught up in it and it was very, very terrible.
Of course.
Honestly, treating it el chisme con mantequilla, because if we don't, it's like you're not gonna fix your tia's 2 cents. You're not.
I love that.
That unfortunately that stigma is gonna stay with the way that she was raised, and you're not gonna change her. So giving her an education, it's just it's not good for you to even like honor the statement, and you gotta just bounce it off, laugh about it. And my grandmother too, the same thing, she's like, adelante el alcalde. I'm like,
Oh my gosh.
you're right in that regard, but I'll never stop wishing and praying upon. She's like, pero te veías muy, pero she's like, lo mejor de lo que te pusiste es que te ves muy flaca siendo astronauta. Like,
They always have something to say, right? You can
Yeah,
never
like-
win.
That's what they deduced, right? That estoy bonita, que no me van a poner flaca, que porque estoy en astronauta, pero me veo bonita. And
It's
that's
like they
okay.
have a roller coaster.
Yeah.
You're like, well, I also had the mayor and she's going to be helping with pop. And they're like, that's great. I don't really care about that.
It's like,
All
let's
I
look at
care
the
is
good
about
side.
me.
I had her at my event, and they're still like, sí, pero no, con ese astronauta no sé para qué te lo pusiste. So it's always like, yeah, no, uno nunca va a estar 100%. And I love that you shared that in the beginning of like, we can't change your perspective. You know, we can laugh about it, which is why we love this segment so much, because it brings back memories that we're not alone again, you know, of like, cuando viene el otro, and I have 2 boys. Oye, la niña pa' cuando? And I'm like, what? Like, it's never enough. Even if I have la niña y la parejita, la vas a dejar sola. So it's like, what do you want from me?
Yeah, exactly. You're like, did you have a parejita? Did you like, did you weigh 100? Cuando yo estaba embarazada, yo pesaba 135 libras. I'm like, wow, I haven't even been that since I got married. And I don't even know what to say to that
But then they
statement
make it
because it's
seem like
wild.
they're helping us or they're just venting out, but
Right.
it's
And
not,
it's
I don't know who's helping out. It's not us.
right. Exactly. So it's like dealing with their own taboos of what they couldn't process as you just honestly just gotta love on them more. You gotta love harder on them in those moments and give yourself grace.
Because I know we lost Cynthia. I guess the topic was too hot.
Too hot.
Segmento. Hopefully she can hop on, but I'll go on with her cue because we first wanted to just thank you for this beautiful conversation. It was so inspiring to not just have you here because it was such a blessing. Thank you for saying yes and for wanting to be part of this movement as well, but for being raw and real because we need more of that. We need to share our story. We need to be a voice for someone that's on the other side overthinking, like me sharing about my stillbirth. And that's why I shared it. And I told Cynthia, thank you as well for overall what we have here, because I was on her podcast to share it. And I told her, don't post it, delete it. Because of that feeling within me of like, I don't want to showcase that, but not because this is what I have built, but because of my trauma. I felt like I'm not good enough, or no, I already passed that. Like, I don't want to talk about that. I don't know why I was so scared, right? So being that voice of just letting it out today, being raw and real is powerful. So you continue to do that. Thank you so much. Now, before we leave, we're going to add into the show notes, but please share with our audience, how can they find you? How can they be part of the Mom Collective, of your events? How can they just connect with you and support your mission?
Yeah. So number one, just always show up for yourselves. However that looks like, just make space, take some time out of your day, whatever that looks like to show up for yourself. And I think, when I started doing that, that's when I felt comfortable in sharing my story because it was a way of showing up for myself. And you guys can find me on Mompreneur Builder on Instagram. I am also obviously Virtual Mom Collective. That account is me in the chairs. And then there's Record, that is the company that I am a minority shareholder on. It's actually WIC Week, which is Women in Construction Week. So we've been highlighting women in our organization and, women who are just continuing to build thriving communities and continue to take space in, again, the roles that we spoke about that are very, very dominated by women in the workforce. And you can find me on my website, DeniseCastro.com. That's where I have links to my books. If you do find, yourself inclined to give it a read, I am really interested in your perspective and your feedback. And, you guys can always just send me a DM. I'm very open. And I just love connecting with other moms, and I'm just so happy that our connection, Jeanette, like this is what the power of connection with community does. It's like a full circle moment that brought me and
I'm
Cynthia.
back.
Cynthia, it's back.
Our power went
It's
out.
back. It was loaded. It was a loaded conversation.
We just continue off for the listeners as well, talking a little bit more in depth. And of course, Denise was just sharing also the ways that we can support her and connect with her, even though we're going to have it on the show notes. But yeah, Denise, we feel the same way. Like, it's crazy how one little seed we plant takes us to the next one of being on your event. that I got the opportunity to speak and Cynthia to join as a guest. That was actually the first time we met in person too, even though we built
That's
Taboo Talks back
amazing.
in November. But going back to thanks to your event, it kind of everything connected of us just doing the meetup and connecting with the girls. And, it's just that power of networking, the power of supporting over competition, right? Knowing that there's room for all of us, no matter what we do, and why we're being raw and real at the end of the day. Because maybe, like I didn't want to share about my stillbirth then, but I was ready now, right? And being raw about knowing that we're not humans, even though we have this movement, we have this community, we're not perfect. We still have moments of doubts. We still have moments that we feel we're not good enough. And we're here to remind each other that we are powerful. So thank you, Denise. Of course, to our listeners, if you love this episode, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Instagram. Connect with us for Taboo Talks, more raw, real, unfiltered conversation. And live every month on Instagram for La Jarrito Taboo, where we go even deeper with questions, rapids that are just so much fun, real, raw, sin filtro. So make sure you're following us. And Cynthia, we're
Yes,
so
thank you
excited,
so
right, for
much.
this
It
beautiful
was a pleasure
community.
to have you on. Hasta la próxima, chicas. Thank you for joining us on conversation like these. Bye.
Ciao.